Hello, boys and girls, and welcome back to another episode of the Movie Pope podcast with your co host Luca here. And today we are going to be interviewing Jon Helgren, who works as an art director. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe. And I see some of you people are watching, but you're not subscribing. I've got my eye on you. Definitely do us a favor and subscribe because we could definitely use the love, and it's a great way to let us know how we're doing. But let's go ahead and dive in. Jon, how are you doing on this fine Saturday afternoon?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, Luca. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. And now I am really, really excited to have you on because you're an art director. And out of all of the positions that that I hear about on film sets, art directing is the one that really, really catches my attention because it caters to my interest as an artist, but it's also an ability to apply what you love. Um, in the world of filmmaking and TV. So, can you go ahead and just dive in and tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into this fascinating world?
Sure. I've been working in the film industry, what I'd call adjacent, non-union film world since 2009 or so, kind of a little bit during when I was finishing up college in Tacoma, Washington. And then I got a communications media emphasis college degree that I thought was somewhat aligned with filmmaking. But at that point, I still hadn't really made a firm decision that that's what I wanted to do art department wise. I just always, I was really bad at the sciences, but like I felt very comfortable and thriving in doing art. And so that seemed like an easy bachelor's degree to, somewhat appease. I need to get a degree to just kind of go into the world, but also
Mhm.
doing things that I felt that I loved, but I still hadn't made that formative decision. I knew I wanted to go to the film industry in LA, but still I was writing scripts. I had my own little DSLR camera. I was making some movies with friends and things, but I hadn't really truly created an identity of what occupation I was. I went up into the Seattle film market. I started to mess around with some indie 48-hour film frenzies and stuff. I got very lucky that I impressed one of those 48-hour film frenzy producers, and they brought me onto the pilot for Man in the High Castle on Amazon.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, and so I got this amazing job opportunity to be a prop master's assistant working in the props department for the pilot. So if you watch the pilot episode, all the handwritten notes are actually my handwriting. Um, yeah, and
Definitely
it
keep
was
an eye on that now because I never would have known that.
yeah, but it was a great opportunity to really appreciate on like a major production how very niche and diverse the job duties are, especially in the art department. And walking into this Walmart-sized warehouse, which they had occupied up in like northern Seattle as like their base camp of just street lights to several standing sets, to then for the 5 weeks we were shooting to going on location around the greater Seattle area and just seeing the art department magically like make the greater Seattle area look like Brooklyn, New York City, to downtown San Francisco, to Missouri, the middle of nowhere, and realize that if you turn the camera this 180 degrees, we're in New York City, and then we dress the other side of a room in the opposite, and realizing very early on that like art department has the ability to create the world for your project into anywhere, and also just the camera is your friend that it will. Yes, if we could look 5 feet to the left or right, we are in Seattle, Washington. But if as long as we stay right here in frame, we are in San Francisco in the 1970s.
So
Um,
can you so sorry, can you
no, go ahead.
walk me through that process? Because what I find so fascinating is the fact that because whenever I read production notes, a lot of them are either filmed in Toronto or Vancouver or in places like Atlanta, but they're set in places like New York or London or cities like that. And what always fascinates me is the ability to turn wherever the production is set into the city that you're located in. But obviously, each city is going to have a distinctive look and a distinctive flavor. So, how I imagine it requires a lot of research and a lot of imagination to kind of make it look the way that the producers and the director wants it. What can you walk me through that process of how that happens? Because it's not an
Sure.
easy feat.
No, and I mean, just to add to what you're saying, it's not just the like imagination to see it, but it takes a little bit of trust of the production designer and art director you've hired on the project, because a lot of times, a lot of productions are led very quickly by the question of like 99 out of 100 questions is always the money. And so it's a production will sometimes talk to me, and that's the shows I like where they go, does this creatively, can you make this work? Because budgetarily, from a production standpoint, it does. And there's been just as many times where I've said, I don't believe that this is actually the best, or this is not going to really work for us because it's going to cost us more in art to actually bring this up to where we need it to be. So just like a good location scout, a lot of productions like to just blur the line and call it a location technical scout, as if art department just doesn't get a choice and this is the empty room we're going to dress into. But good location scouting is just that. It's, does this actually work for everybody, production and art? And so, sorry, did that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, it kind of does because because when it comes to because when it comes to trying to make your location look like the location that's in the script, obviously it's never going to be an easy task. I mean, ideally, if everybody could film in London, for instance, that would be great. Or if everybody could film in a certain location, that'd be great. But for whatever reason, that may not happen. I know the biggest I know one of the biggest locations where a lot where a lot of people would like to film is Westminster Abbey, but obviously Westminster Abbey is not going to be too happy about camera crews just waltzing in and filming. So they usually use like a different cathedral in England or Europe somewhere and kind of dress it up to look like Westminster Abbey.
Sure.
I do want to ask. So for those of us out there who aren't too familiar with art directing, what exactly is that?
So, as the production designer on a production, I'm responsible for helping to further the story through color and design. I'm responsible for everything besides the physical actors themselves. So, from the design of the spaces to working with my set decorator and prop master for both elements that are dressing the character spaces to the props the actors touch. I also, and a lot of people will, younger filmmakers might not realize this as much, is that the production designer also has heavily influence of like collaboration with the lighting and actually making sure that the lighting that is seen in camera makes sense, or the lighting that's seen off frame matches to the practical lighting that's in the space and the color temperatures, and then talking with wardrobe and hair and makeup to make sure that if the character space looks like a drug den but they're very well dressed, there's been a miscommunication between art design and wardrobe design. So
Mhm.
I collaborate through all departments to ensure a cohesive production design, hence the title.
So so it would sort of be similar to like a set designer in the world of theater, right?
It's a hard comparison because the set designer still touches, like as a production designer, I have a influence and touch with everything, and yet in the true sense, I shouldn't actually touch anything in particular. I make sure
Gotcha.
that all the departments are cohesively working, because the producer hires on the director, and then the director hires on his DP and production designer, and the three of us are the three pillars that the DP is going to frame it and light it in a good way to showcase the space. The director is going to elicit the best performance from the actor. And I'm going to work with all the other departments and the art department specifically to make sure that the space and the elements used in it elevate the characters through nonverbal means, through color and design.
Gotcha. So in other words, you're kind of responsible for everything else that isn't handled by the director or the production
Correct.
producer. Okay.
I mean, I'm still facilitating his vision or her vision, but at the same time, like I'm putting a crazy emphasis of research and my own flavor into making the world cohesive.
So, so just to backtrack a little bit, so you said that you studied communications in college.
Mhm.
Um, did anything that you study kind of prepare you for working as an art director, or is this something that you kind of have to learn, while you're on the job?
Well, so that's the funny thing about it. you can go to film school and get a production design degree. And I will say that there's a technical aspect to like learning some type of computer generated drafting design so you can articulate your designs and renders to your director or whomever.
Hmm.
But like because it's the film industry, I would say, is divided between a very technical side and a very I don't want to call it non-technical because that's a disservice to like the art department, hair, makeup, wardrobe, because those people have amazing skill sets. But it's easy to budget for how much your lighting is going to cost on a show, and there's only so many ways you can light a scene with the lights you have. But there's 1,000 different ways to make a 7 foot tall rotating gloss red cake for people to dance on. And so art direction and production design, I would say, is like a major part of it is life experience, because you'll be asked to design things that are not from this era. You'll be asked to design things from experiences of people that you've never been. I've designed like a 16-year-old's bedroom in 1970, an era I never was alive for and a gender that I am not. So, I mean,
Right.
the ability to research, the ability to try to experience as much as possible, to appreciate design and things of that nature as much as possible. And like, you can't go to school to just learn about the 70s. You have to just choose those eras. Um, but then like the technical ability of just how does a film set work and how are all these departments assets to you, I would say just working in a film production in any department eventually tells you about lighting and camera, because any production designer that dismisses how the DP is going to frame it and how the gaffer is going to light it is going to be very frustrated when they go into detail in a space and then it's just going to be lit all moodily, or vice versa. Not a lot of decoration and they light the heck out of it, and then all of a sudden you're exposed that you have nothing in the space.
Gotcha. But you're also guided by what's in the script as well. Because if the script calls for,
Mm-hmm.
say, like a very Spartan, atmosphere,
Mm-hmm.
obviously the way that design and set up, the scenery, for the actors to perform, and it's going to be informed by what the writer has had in mind.
Yes, and that comes from the director as well, and appreciating that it very rarely is everything explicit in the script. There's specific call outs, there's a little paragraph description, but like human beings don't have just 10 objects in a room or 20 objects in a room. And so there's a lot of that artistic ability of then letting my set decorator just run with, do you think the character would have this or that? And I would just give general guidance based off of my impressions. And
Hmm.
I've already posed my impressions past the director, who's already either written the script or he's had his discussions with the writer. And so it's just this waterfall of trust and a little bit of our own flavor at every echelon, all the way down to the set tech and the set dressers, positioning it once we get frame up on set to make sure that we're getting most production value to help elevate the characters by just seeing the space of like, oh, I think I understand this person a little bit better because I'm just seeing things that like the script is not called for, but it's in the room and it's lit in a way that we see it and we're like, got it. This person is very neat. This person's an alcoholic. This person's a World War II veteran, because of these little contextual things that they're not explicit, but they absolutely elevate the characters in the story much faster than any dialogue ever could.
Right. So to go back to your example from earlier about decorating, a girl's bedroom from the 1970s. I mean, obviously you're going to be informed by 70s aesthetics, and by
Mhm.
the cultural scene, like music, clothing, that kind of stuff. I- if we're using that example, what would the conversation be like, or what would the inspiration be to kind of decide, whether or not to put like board games in that person's room, or have, the rotary phone be like, yellow instead of red, stuff like
Mhm.
that.
Well, I mean, color palette's always a big thing with production design, and so we talk about the color palettes. There's always a big deconfliction between wardrobe and production design, specifically to make sure if the room's yellow, that the characters aren't wearing yellow, or if we want it to be that whimsical, we lean into that.
Hmm.
Um, and typically, when I have my early on production design conversations with the director, we play the game where it's do I have a director that's overly prepared to handle their production designer, in which case they provide me lookbooks and renders and references already that they've queued up because they wanted to. or do I have production design, or do I have directors that, uh, no disrespect to any directors because I get it, but some directors that love their DP more than they love their production designer, and so they just talk about what the frame and the lenses are going to be, and they just say just make it look cool, and it then puts the ball in my court to present my lookbooks to them to make sure everybody is on the same page once we get to actually shooting. And so just being transparent with, like you said, references, color palettes, and then also realistically, what can we actually source within the budget and time and space available for the project.
Gotcha, gotcha. So just piggybacking off, off of the conversation about directors. I mean, do art directors typically like the director who already has a plan, or do they tend to like directors who kind are like, yeah, I'm just gonna leave it up to you. You make the call.
I mean, I think I'm a mature enough production designer that I'm still facilitating a director's vision, and I appreciate some equity for him to just him or her to facilitate, like, just these are the key things I'm concerned about, and this is the basic, but beyond that, let your set decorator, prop master, and your design go with it, and just show me what you're referencing. And so like that classic healthy collaboration in filmmaking is what I thrive in.
Hmm.
And I can absolutely just like go by the numbers if a director is totalitarian of just saying this is exactly what we need to get, but I'm still going to fight for my little percentage, but maybe fight less, because at the end of the day too, if they want to, it has to be just like this. I'm not going to fight that because I have plenty of projects that let me fly my flag and just go with it, and they're, I will say, to 95% very happy with everything. So I would say the answer to your question is just a collaboration, like a middle ground,
Gotcha.
neither full them or full me, because that's not what filmmaking should be. It should always be a trust that we're both professionals, can do our part of the job.
So, so what would you say would be like the number one thing that you've learned, during your time as an art director that you feel would be the most important lesson for all, up and coming filmmakers and art directors to know when they're getting their start in the industry?
I would, I mean, well, I'll do two parts of this. I'll do the one for just for directors. Find production designers that like designing,
Hmm.
and give them the trust to do that portion of it. You have a hard enough job managing your actors and performance. Whether or not you want to have it closer and like give that presentation and that lookbook and tell the PD this is what I want, or just say, or be a little bit more empowering and say, show me references of what you're going to do and can deliver for me. But either way, just let them run with that part of it, because that PD is not going to tell your actors what to do. Vice versa, don't do their job for them. um, and that's really hard working with new directors. So like that's what I would probably build: good relationships with PDs. They will make your job super easy in your DP, and you will love them if that's the case. But if you squish a PD to just be afraid of, I hope he likes all these things, and you're one of those directors which constantly reminds, this is what I don't like, as opposed to being productive of saying, this isn't what I'm looking for, I'm looking for this instead. Like that's the true collaboration. And I run into a lot of younger directors that they're kind of a little bit more, they can't let go because it's so abstract, and they can't trust that anyone can see their vision but them. And I guarantee you, good PDs can. Um, for just all filmmakers, if you want to be a production designer or art director, uh, self study is a big part of it. You can go to a school if you think that's gonna help you, if that's where you thrive to get that baseline, but you will leave that school and realize that life experience, your own research and design, and no film school on the planet can prepare you to design for every project you're going to run into. In my short 6-year career in Los Angeles, have done things from spaceships to sci-fi to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ to teenage girls' bedrooms to high schools to horror movies to romantic comedies to Hallmark happy marriages and everything else. And like every one of those has design challenges, have everyone has design nuances to it. And that just comes from design experience and the ability to research and to just be flexible with your budget, with your time, with managing good quality art crew that you'll have to find, because you can't do it by yourself.
Right, right. So, so my next question is, how long do you normally have to, you know, design a set? Because because obviously you've got to work within budgetary constraints because you only get X amount of dollars, and then you mentioned sometimes you're presented with a design that you may not be entirely familiar with, so that includes a lot of research. In obviously film and TV sets are going to be fast paced and things have to get done in a timely manner. How much time do you have to kind of get things done before the first shot?
Well, I mean, it depends on the scale and the type of project, because a lot of times, I mean, I graduated from, I say, the school of rap music videos in Los Angeles. That was the first thing that I think I've done upwards of 100 of them, some of which have gotten to like the VMA nominated level, Video Music Awards level in Los Angeles. And even those high end ones, I would get a call from the producer that I worked with like a week and a half before. Hey, I'm just soft confirming you for a project. And then a week out, they're like, hey, it's confirmed. And then like, hey, start getting your crew together because we have to like build 5 sets and all this stuff. And you have $9,000 in materials and it has to happen this day before. And so very, very quick turnaround. And that level of stress and quick turnaround really prepared me for going into kind of the narrative space. And I still work on like what I would say is like lower end feature films where we have a couple of weeks discussion and we're being practical about where are we actually having to build on a soundstage as opposed to dressing into existing locations.
Hmm.
And like commercial shoots are the same thing too, where because it's so corporate and cookie cutter, it's such a short turnaround, but they have the money to afford just 3 days prep, get the things, get it on the truck, dress it into the space the day of, and you'll have more than enough hands to do it. So it varies every single show. Like I'm doing a very exciting 17-page horror short film for a producer friend of mine that it's a luxury for a short film that we've actually had 45 days that we've been talking and nitpicking every single facet of this because we have some complicated camera shots and that affects art because it's like 360 dressing and other things too. So like for a short film, 45 days prep is a luxury. For some of the short, low budget features, a couple weeks I can live with. And there will be a lot of hemming and hawing for me if it's less than that. But I have a pretty hardy art crew, and I have a military background a little bit too. That like just get the job done. We can do it.
Right.
And I've had to remind my art crews had to remind me sometimes. Like, dude, we didn't join the army with you, so we need a little bit more. And so in
Yeah.
my little bit like veteran status now, I've just kind of started to push back and define my value, but it always varies.
So, so 45 days is kind of like, a luxury, as you would say. Um, so really, so really getting, being told, hey, you've got a week to get this done, and they're only telling you like maybe, you know, 14 to 7 days, in advance. That's kind of like, you really, really got to hustle, right?
And doing it enough times, I already have a lot of like things preset that I know. Like I have pre-made documents of like the account websites and like forms that I immediately will shoot to the producer when I want to rent from this prop house or that prop house. I have an Excel roster of all of my crew of different occupations, so I can immediately rapid fire call the list to see who's available. And then I work with the same people a lot that like I just tell them on the onset, hey, this is going to be a hard and fast one, or we can relax on this, or whatever. And then I've just learned from my past mistakes of like defining where your center of gravity is. What is the biggest, hardest thing that we have to do to get this design done?
Hmm.
And then reverse prioritize from there. We will go to IKEA and pick up the fake plants and like the basic white plateware. That'll be at the end. We will focus on making the spaceship first because that's going to be our time constraint. We don't need it to, we need to give the most love to that before anything else.
That actually makes sense too, because if you do the difficult part first, then the easy part just flies by pretty quickly. I think that's a lesson that everybody learns. It's not simply just relegated to the film industry. So John, we're coming to the end of our conversation, but if people want to learn more about you, if they want to connect with you, where can they go?
Well, you can follow me on Instagram. I have Instagram, Jon Helgren Designs. That's the exact same thing for my website, which you can also go to if you wanted to contact me. I'm always happy to talk to young, aspiring art director PDs. I'm always interested in bringing more people onto my roster and building more of the diversity of experiences with my crew because everybody brings something different. So I encourage anybody to try to reach out to me if they want to just have like a quasi phone interview and learn more. If you have any questions about developing yourself as art director PDs, don't hesitate to email me.
And on that note, I mean, you don't necessarily need to be an artist to work, in the art department, right?
I would say you got to love it because if you don't love doing art and design, spray painting 100 panels gold is going to be tedious and not fun because there's 10% of what is fun of doing art and design and 90% which is hard work to get to that final result. So if you don't love it, maybe evaluate what other film role might be interesting, but I definitely encourage everyone to at least do it for some period to understand it, to make yourself a better filmmaker, especially directors.
Yeah, because and the reason why I ask is because I know is because I've watched a lot of interviews where they've interviewed people who work in art directing, and some of these people, they're like, yeah, I can draw, but I'm not great, but you can just tell that they're so passionate about the work that they do. So that's the reason why I bring that up, is because I know sometimes there are some people out there who can only draw stick figures, but they're
Oh,
like,
oh, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm actually a relatively poor two-dimensional like sketch artist, but like my mother was an interior designer, my dad was an architect.
yeah, yeah,
And so like I like interior design, but I'm not a painter. And so being an art director is you have artistic taste, but also more importantly, you can manage other skilled art department craftspeople underneath you and you work with them. So it's a collaborative department, just like it's a collaborative art form in the film industry. So as long
yeah.
as you have good scenic painters, as long as you have good interior decorators, you could be colorblind. So, but
Yeah,
it went
and yeah, and I was gonna say, I guess the point I'm trying to get across is you don't necessarily need to be Michelangelo in order to work as in the art department, right?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Gotcha, gotcha. Well, John, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I mean, I'm so glad I got a chance to talk to you because, like I said, I mean, the art department, is one of those, is one of those aspects of filmmaking that really, really catches my attention because, whenever I'm watching a TV show or a movie, and and I see a scene and I see like, lamps and tchotchkes and everything, it just makes me wonder, like, how do they know which item to put in there? Like, how do they decide which Funko Pop they want to put on that shelf? Because, because while it may seem like child's play, when you think about it, it's like you kind of have to get into the character's head in order to figure out, like, would they really have something like this, or would they have a book like this on their shelf?
Every item is a deliberate choice, and when it's done correctly, it elevates the characters and doesn't distract the viewer. And that's the biggest trick that people assume, oh, well, where was this? We made it on a soundstage. Walls, decoration, every Funko Pop, every lamp. It was all deliberate choices, and that's what good design it should be.
Yeah, and I was gonna say too, because I'm a huge fan of that show, that '70s show, and
Hmm.
like whenever I see Eric Foreman's bedroom, I'm like, that is so clear. So they've got a Mercury capsule, but they've also got a Led Zeppelin poster. I'm like, I mean, how did they do it? um, so John, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on the show. But before we wrap up, is there a movie or TV show that you've seen recently that you want to give a shout out to?
Um, Honestly, the one that I recently saw, I just watched Napoleon.
Oh, the Ridley Scott movie.
Hmm. It got a little bit of a snub. I think Oppenheimer kind of cleaned house with the awards this year, but like
Yeah.
um, it's hard to do a period piece like that during an era where everything has to be recreated and like the spectacle and the scale of it. I would say if it for a production design standpoint, it was absolutely incredible. And like the scale that they did those things on too, just it blew my mind. So it was really enjoyable to watch.
So let me ask you this. So for the movie Napoleon, which would you say was a bit more of a challenge to do the set design for? Is it the battle scenes, or is it the scenes, in Paris or in the palace?
Oh God. Well, I mean, the beauty of like doing Napoleon, I imagine, is the fact that they had support of. I don't know if they actually how much of it they actually filmed in Paris. I actually don't know, but I know that most of those buildings were actual stone structures. And the beauty when you do period things like that of something that looks timeless and it's historical and it's made of stone, it's just still there and it has been untouched since the time of Napoleon. And so that makes your life a little bit easier, but then it's also constricting because it's a period location and you need it to be larger than life. So the battle scenes are easier, but easier in a comparison to like trying to build Versailles or something that looks similar to it, because
Right,
they're
right.
both just massive undertakings. But at least you're just having to prop up and get all these thousands of horses and coordinate pyrotechnics and do these big technocrane shots. And you're operating in a open field environment where it's a lot of drones and you have room to operate. When you're
Hmm.
dealing with historic locations or trying to build these structures and things, um, that becomes all these other things where, oh well, the house still exists, let's just shoot there. That that works maybe for one camera person for a documentary, but when you're trying to actually do a film production, that could actually be a slippery slope of, is it actually even worth it for us to shoot at the practical location because of the constraints of it being historical versus having the freedom to just build our own piece of just what we need, like you said, shooting at the Abbey, as opposed to, do we need the full Abbey shot or do we just need a chunk of it and we'll just build it on a soundstage because it's easier than trying to go into inner city Paris with a film production and take over this historic landmark.
Exactly, exactly. Well, not to mention the fact too that, in some of these houses in Europe, they're still occupied. So
Hmm.
there's also there's also the added, what's the right word, constraint of making sure you don't do too much damage to that person's house.
Yeah, there's a real good example of the fact of like any movie that you see of period with a horse and buggy. I guarantee you the production either rented one that's been made just for Hollywood so that it can handle film crew, camera rigs on the buggy, and also be a lot more comfortable for the actors riding in it, as opposed to anything that's original. So it goes to the point again of, even if a building or a prop or an item or a location still exists in its original form for our story, can it actually support the wear and tear and needs of a film production? That's what I tell a lot of directors too, of like, is this house that we found in Echo Park that we're cramming this whole film show into, is it really incredible enough that we couldn't just design this on a stage? Is it worth it? And that
Right,
and that's
right.
like the early on production design conversation of, do we really need this house to be a practical one? Because it seems like the location's not practical for the rest of the crew, or for us to pull out a wall for the framing of the camera. And then we're just all dying in 100-degree heat inside this tiny little house as all the lights are turned on.
Gotcha, gotcha. Well, John, I could talk to you for hours, but I'm going to go ahead and let you go. But I do plan on bringing you back because I think we've only scratched the surface. And seriously, there are just so many questions that are in my mind that I really, really want to ask you. So,
Hmm.
I really do want to have you come back on the show.
I would love to
Uh,
come back, Luca.
Excellent. Well, that's going to do it for our episode. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you on the flip side.